In Search of Our Throwaway History, which is the title of a DVD. It's a documentary about all those brands and that packaging that were kind of part of our life. They are a very powerful and evocative way of remembering former days. And the man sitting opposite me is the man behind it. He's Robert Opie, who's the director of the Museum of Brands, Packaging and Advertising, which is over there in Notting Hill. And he's here with us now. Robert, welcome to the show. For those who don't know the museum briefly, give us a very quick rundown.
Whoa. Well, I find it a really exciting place because whenever I go in there, I interact with people who are just getting back to their childhood. And it's a scary process because the museum actually starts off in Victorian times. And you go through our time tunnel and gradually you work your way through decade by decade until that moment when suddenly that whoosh of nostalgia hits you. And it's a very emotive feeling. And people are always, gosh, I remember. And it springs out all those amazing memories.
So can you tell the age of someone from the point at which they connect?
Totally. And I do warn women, if you're going to scream out at a moment, that will give your age away.
What are the oldest brands that we still kind of recognise, if you like, do you think?
Well, that's a difficult question. I mean, many brands go back a long way. I mean, Twinings tea, 300 years. It'll be 200 years of Coleman's mustard, Guinness, 250 years, and so on. But brands Lars Golden Syrup.
Yep.
Now
that golden and green tin, that beautiful...
Absolutely. Yep. That goes back to 1885. So there are lots of things that you will recognise.
Oxo, I guess.
Way before Oxo, Cubes, 1910, Brasso, 1905, and so on.
Is it the packaging that we get? I mean, it's odd, isn't it? Because you see the packaging and suddenly you can smell the product, or you can taste it, or you can remember the advert on the telly, or you can remember what it was like buying it in a shop.
Totally. And of course, those images not only capture a moment from, I don't know, the school playground, a crisp packet or something like that, but also kind of family memories, the day that you were at the seaside and, Dad spilt something, or, I don't know, a Christmas party.
Going to the pictures and getting a Kia-Ora or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
Any of those kind of things.
I mean, one of the biggest memories people have is the Whatners Party 7 moment.
Wow.
Do you remember those?
Yeah, I do indeed.
I mean, they were a great thing. I mean, mainly in the 70s. But you went to a party with Whatners Party 7, and it was a kind of passport to entry. You opened it, and then, of course, half the contents landed on the ceiling because it was well shook up, And we have all those memories in this DVD.
Yeah, so tell me about the DVD. Why did you put this together?
I don't know now. It's taken 3 years, but it's been absolutely amazing because I've learned a lot along this journey. We've managed to cram in 3,500 items. So
wow.
It's an absolutely astonishing endeavour in many ways. That there's one disc full of all that material, which is 2 hours, and then there's another disc full of various other bits and pieces, including kind of my story behind it and so on.
Well, I mean, on the cover, there's Spangles and Texas bars, and there's Omo, and there's Tide, and there is a Whatners Party 7, and I mean, an extraordinary kind of array of those brands and packagings that really do take you back. Cresta, it's frothy, man. Is it the brands of our youth? Does it tend to be the sweets and the ice creams and the things of our school years, perhaps?
Totally, because that's when we first start to interact with all these products, and they are exciting at this time when we discover them. And the extraordinary thing is, of course, that we think that they have sort of come out just for us. So I can remember once being in the museum when it used to be in Gloucester, and this guy was saying, oh gosh, I can remember the Crunchy Bar coming out in the 70s. And then the guy next to him said, no, I'm sure it was around in the 60s. And I then kept on and said, well, actually, it was launched in 1929.
29? Wow.
And we forget how far these brands go back.
I mean, there are things in it. It's funny, I've just looked on the back of the DVD and seen a mint cracknel. Now, I haven't seen a mint cracknel in many, many, many years, but I can taste it immediately. And we used to get mint cracknel when I went to my nan's in Shepherd's Bush.
But there you go, so you're suddenly into that bubble.
It's happened absolutely instantly from that one little picture on the back of the DVD.
And that's what I find so exciting with this. I mean, I can remember... We did a programme maybe 25 years ago where you were there for the minimalist side of it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do indeed.
And I was there because I was saving everything.
And I'm sure you were right.
Well, I don't know, but here you've got something which won't take much space up in your house. And yet it contains this vast amount of information.
And yet it isn't. I mean, the only thing I would say in my own defence is I'm very glad you keep them, not me.
Well, I wish I'd been opposite in many ways. But, they have... what I really hope is when people get this, they'll be sitting around at Christmas watching this with the family, and everybody will have different memories. And, of course, all those memories will come out of things we've forgotten. Mum and Dad will be saying to the children, gosh, I remember when you did this. And the children will be saying, but I can remember this. And the grandparents will then join in and say, well, actually, there was another memory here. Because all these things are so entrenched in us that we're kind of... Brands are kind of knitted into our society. They're part of our fabric. They endure with us all the time. They're kind of our safety network. And we tend to forget how important they are.
Where do you collect them from? I mean, most people who collect things can go to car boot sales, or they can go on eBay, or they can go to specialist dealers. Where do you collect stuff like this, which has no intrinsic value, does it? So for other people won't be flogging it because there's no value in it.
Well,
to
not
anyone
only
but
that,
you.
but they do not survive.
No.
And, as this DVD is called, it's our throwaway history. And that's what we all do. We throw it away.
Yeah.
And therefore, to save it is very important. Now, as it so happens, this DVD has coincided with my 50th anniversary of saving packaging.
Right.
And here is the first packet that I saved.
Munchies?
A packet of Munchies.
Really?
Now, you have a look at that.
Is that the actual one?
That's the actual one.
Now, here's another question. How do you keep them in such good condition? The chocolates clearly have been eaten by a greedy boy. And they were 7D at the time, so that shows you how old it is.
But nevertheless, you save it because, I knew at that particular moment 50 years ago that this story should be recorded.
Is that the actual first one?
Absolutely. And 7D, as you say. Now, today, if you went round to a local corner shop, that would cost you 91p, unless, of course, you go to the supermarket.
Right.
There you can find it for 50p. And that's one of the
And they
huge
wouldn't have the
differences.
price written on them either, would they?
Absolutely not, because the price changes so often.
Yes.
But that's the big difference between then and now. I mean, there have been many other differences.
So that is literally where it all started for you.
That's where it started. At that particular moment, when I was eating the contents of that packet, I had that inspirational moment that I should be saving this throwaway history.
I want to give you that back because it feels precious now.
Well, it is precious. But, you can see that there is very little difference between today and yesterday.
Yeah.
And yet...
Munchies, it's absolutely recognisable as a Munchies packet now,
totally.
isn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Although I didn't even know they still made Munchies, truth be told.
Well, there you go. But so many brands kind of have cycles like that. They tend to disappear because you're not looking at the sweetie counter.
Yeah.
But all these things, you ask the question, how do these things survive? Where do you find them? Well, you find them because they're just out there somewhere, but a lot of things aren't. I'm still looking for a wartime can of Spam.
I was going to
cannot
say,
find it.
Is there a holy grail that you would...
Well, I don't know about Holy Grails. I've got hundreds of things I'm still looking for, quite literally. Spam is one of them from the wartime period. I feel, I've got
Someone must have it in.
Someone must have it in, but it'll be full.
Yeah.
It won't be empty. As soon as it's empty, you throw it away. I'm still looking for an early Marmite jar, pre-1925, when it went into the shape that we now are familiarised with. And the first packet of Cocoa Pops. When do you think that was?
I would have thought late 50s, perhaps.
Well, you'd be absolutely right. It was actually 1960.
Right.
But I cannot find one of those. But why should I? Because why would somebody have kept one?
Exactly.
And yet here I've got...
But do they turn up, these things? Do you occasionally...
Well, they do turn up,
And
yes.
how do they turn up? What...
You never know. They
They're
survive
sent from
because...
God.
Well,
no, but how do you know about them? How does someone who's got one of these suddenly think, oh, I know Robert Opie would like that?
Well, people do bring things into the museum, but they tend to bring in the things that everybody has, the medicinal things that perhaps we've still got in the cupboards, or maybe an oxo tin that everybody seems to have had. But one of the things that really has helped survival are dummy packs for shop window displays. And I was saving those in the 60s, and that's the core to it. I've been saving this for 50 years, so a lot of this looks fairly ancient to people who are now in their 20s.
I mean, these days you've got a proper museum to put them in. Where were you keeping them all when you were just doing this as a hobby?
Well, the museum's been around for 30 years,
right,
so I've been
okay.
building it up over time. I was storing it in my parents' house. In my
I bet they loved you.
Oh, but they were collectors as well, you see. So
Were they?
we were a family of collectors. We all
Really?
understood what the point of it was, and that's the whole purpose of doing these things, that you have an end result.
Does the collection have an academic value as well? I mean, do kind of designers come and study it, or social historians?
Totally, yes. And we've had actors coming in to try and get into that particular world. We certainly have a lot of people, social historians, who are interested. people who write books are interested just to discover the detail. And of course, I've written a series of scrapbooks as well with all the information you would need visually for each of those decades from Victorian right up to the 1970s.
I mean, because when I look at the cover of the DVD, for example, a lot of which seem to me to be kind of essentially late 60s, early 70s style brands. I guess that appeals to my generation, if you like, the Crestas and the Spangles and the Omos and the Party Sevens, as you said. One of the things you would say immediately is there's a brightness, there's perhaps a naivety about the packaging that you, in these perhaps slightly more sophisticated age, you wouldn't get. It's all very direct, isn't it?
Totally. And yet a lot of people say when they see the Victorian packaging, they say, wonderful design, how exciting, why do we have that today? Which, of course, would be difficult because it wouldn't look right in today's supermarket. But believe you me, in another 30 years' time, we'll be looking at today's packaging
Will we?
and say, yes.
Do you
and
think
we'll say,
so?
yeah, absolutely. And it'll be wonderful and exciting and emotive in its own way for a different generation.
But is one of the differences now, perhaps, that the products that we consume are multinational? I mean, I know there will be differences in packaging in different countries and things, but we do live in a global age, essentially, don't we? So
totally. But I think that's a little sad that you can be in a different city
So
somewhere
do
else
I.
in the world and it'll look so homogenous.
For example, my wife, who has never smoked in her life, when I first met her 20-odd years ago, had a collection of cigarette packets from around the world. And she had Arabic cigarette packets and Russian cigarette packets. And just because she loved the design of them, they were just beautiful things. Now, I suspect they're not as different as that now.
They won't be, no. And that's a pity. I mean, cigarettes is a difficult subject because it's
Yeah,
so
of course.
off the beaten track.
Yeah.
But you know, I can remember going out to Australia once and, you know, whenever I go to a new country, the first port of call for me is a supermarket. And well, why not?
Yes.
And, you know, there I was looking at the breakfast cereals, but instead of having Rice Krispies, they have rice bubbles. You know,
Wow.
And so made by colours. And I thought, well, what a wonderful difference, you know. And I love those changes that are all over the place. You know, it's not called Fairy Liquid in Scandinavia. I think it's called Yes. You know, so there are all kinds of differences still.
And we get strangely upset when people change the names
Yes,
of
from
things,
Marathon
don't we?
changes to Snickers.
And
I
people
still find people
talk about
refuse to eat
Yes,
it.
Exactly.
Or Oprah for Starburst, you know, or Jifta Sif, you know. Why?
Jifta Sif was one of the most kind of bizarre in the entire... Why did they do that?
But the reason a lot of these things survive historically is because of the dummy pack. Now, these were done for window displays, which have virtually disappeared now.
Yeah.
And, for instance, where would you be able to find an ice cream briquette wrapper?
Oh, wow, look at that.
Unless it had survived as a dummy form. Now, this, you know, some of these things are unbelievably scarce. But when you look at the stories, they're such fun. And just as it happens, on the back of this particular packet, it says, "Keep the streets and country tidy. When you are finished with this wrapper, please deposit in a litter receptacle." And then it says afterwards, "Thank you." Now, I think that's probably the first time in the 1930s that someone has taken the trouble to suggest where to throw your wrapper. And that's the beginning of our litter society.
How brilliant. Robert, where can people get the DVD?
Well, we can get it from the museum. We're open today and tomorrow, for instance. We're closed on Monday, so do come to the museum and enjoy the whole experience.
Tell them where it is.
Well, it's in Notting Hill, very close to Portobello Road. Do get a map, or
It's quite complicated.
It can be complicated. We're in Lonsdale, just off Lonsdale Road. So you know, just find us there. But get the DVD also if you can't make it to the museum.
Website?
Look at our website, www.throwawayhistory.com. Throwawayhistory.com. You can get it from Amazon as well.
Robert Opie from the Museum of Brands telling us about In Search of Our Throwaway History. Thank you very, very much.